It was just a letter, an aged piece of paper forgotten by time. Found in a rusty safe in the basement of a Hollywood mansion, its contents seemed more like a paranoid delusion than a real warning. However, as the years passed, events described within it began to come true. Scandals emerged, careers were destroyed, untouchable figures fell one by one. What once seemed like an absurd prophecy now appeared to be a roadmap for the downfall of the entertainment elite. But who wrote this letter? And more importantly, how could someone decades ago have predicted Hollywood's collapse with such accuracy? Welcome to another night where mysteries never sleep. I am Midnight, and this is 7 Nights. Before we begin, I'd like to ask for your help. Like the video, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It's just one click, but it makes a huge difference in helping YouTube share the videos with more people and allowing me to keep bringing this content to you. I'm counting on you. Let's get to the video. The house had been vacant for years, a relic of golden times forgotten amidst the march of modernity. Located in a neighborhood where mansions from Hollywood's golden age had turned into silent ruins, this property belonged to a former industry magnate whose name had long disappeared from the spotlight. When the new owners decided to renovate it, they never expected to find something that would forever change their perception of the entertainment elite. While removing the old furniture, workers discovered a hidden passage behind a bookshelf. The narrow corridor led to an unknown basement, where a rusted safe rested beneath layers of dust and cobwebs. There were no keys or recorded combinations anywhere, and the lock seemed sealed by time. After hours of trying to open it, the metal finally gave way, revealing an interior that appeared empty at first glance. But at the bottom, folded with surgical precision, was a single envelope, yellowed with age. The letter had no sender or obvious signature, just a broken wax seal and meticulously crafted handwriting. The first lines were enigmatic, as if serving as a warning to anyone daring to read its contents. The spectacle is about to crumble. The audience will applaud without realizing they are witnessing their own destruction. The text spoke of silent pacts, promises sealed in shadows, and secrets that upheld Hollywood's machine. But the most intriguing aspect was the detailed mention of events that, at the time the letter was written, had yet to occur. How could someone predict with such precision the downfall of the industry's most influential figures? The date in the upper corner indicated that the letter had been written in the 1950s, a period when Hollywood basked in the illusory glow of glamour and the absolute power of the studios. However, what was described there pointed to events of the following decades: scandals of harassment, psychological manipulation, the rise and fall of stars, all documented as if it were a preordained script. The authenticity of the document was questioned, but an analysis of the paper and ink confirmed it was genuinely old. Handwriting experts attempted to identify the author, but the strokes resembled those of several figures from the era, making an exact identification impossible. Could it have been the work of a remorseful director, an actor who had seen too much, or someone inside the studios with access to secrets that were never meant to be revealed? The mystery deepened when researchers found evidence that this was not the only copy. Other similar letters had been mentioned in closed industry circles, some allegedly destroyed before they could surface. What would drive someone to write such detailed predictions and distribute them so deliberately? Among the most disturbing passages, one stood out. They sold their souls for a leading role. But the stage will collapse, and the spotlights will reveal the truth no one wants to see. Who is this referring to? Was it about a specific group or the entire structure of Hollywood? Those who had access to the letter's contents realized that some predictions had already come true, but others were still looming. If the document was right, the worst was yet to come. The final collapse of the industry was approaching, and when it arrived, there would be no turning back. But how could a letter lost for so long contain such precise words? Was it mere coincidence, or was there something far more sinister behind it all? The letter did not just reveal industry secrets, it seemed to deliver a clear warning. Hollywood was destined to collapse under the weight of its own choices. The document mentioned an invisible pact, a silent agreement made behind the scenes to keep certain names at the top while others were discarded without ceremony. But how did this system work? And more importantly, who was truly in control? For decades, the film industry has projected the image of a glamorous world where talent and charisma were the keys to success. However, the letter described a vastly different reality, an environment where meteoric rises were rarely the result of hard work alone. Between the lines of the text, it was stated that fame is not given but granted, and there is always a price. Curiously, throughout cinema history, numerous artists have gone from absolute stardom to being forgotten within months, often without a convincing explanation. Some were suddenly embroiled in scandals, others suffered inexplicable public breakdowns. Marilyn Monroe, Judy Garland, River Phoenix, Brittany Murphy, cases of tragic deaths surrounded by mystery and doubt. Were these mere coincidences, or examples of what the letter was trying to warn about? The document explicitly stated that the spectacle needs new faces to survive, and the old ones are disposable. This cycle of renewal was essential to maintain audience interest, but it also meant that few would emerge from the industry unscathed. Those who tried to detach themselves from the system or question its rules often faced ostracism, as if they had been erased from the map without warning. In the 1970s, Hollywood underwent a significant transformation. The end of the Hays Code, a set of moral rules that censored sensitive topics in films, paved the way for bolder productions, but also coincided with an era of excess behind the scenes. Many directors and actors later reported that the parties at major studios were not just celebrations, but environments where promises were made and silent commitments were forged. The letter contained a particularly enigmatic passage about this period. The contract is never just on paper. Signing is easy, leaving is impossible. Could this indicate that certain artists and directors entered into agreements from which they could not escape? Was it merely a metaphor for the harsh reality of fame, or was there something darker hidden within these words? What made the document even more unsettling was its insistence on predicting that Hollywood would one day become a victim of its own structure. It mentioned that, over time, the cracks in the system would become evident and that those who were once adored would be the first to fall. In recent years, numerous scandals have come to light, revealing abusive power dynamics that had long been whispered about in the industry's corridors. The #MeToo movement was one of the biggest milestones of this transformation. Producers, directors, and actors who were once untouchable saw their careers crumble overnight. The letter seemed to anticipate something of this nature, mentioning that the silence of the innocent will be broken when no one can hide the wounds anymore. Could this have been a reference to the impact of these revelations and the dismantling of abuse schemes that had remained hidden for decades? Another passage suggested that this downfall was only the beginning. When the mask falls, the audience will no longer see idols, but rather something that has always been there, hidden in plain sight. Who is this referring to? Was it just a metaphor for the audience's disillusionment with the industry, or a hint that even greater secrets were about to be exposed? The idea that Hollywood was sustained by invisible forces had always circulated as a rumor among skeptics. However, the letter seemed to suggest that these forces not only existed but were beginning to lose control. Did this mean the industry's destruction was inevitable? Or was something being done to prevent this fate? If the document was correct, much was yet to be revealed. But the question that remained was, could anyone stop the collapse before it was too late? Hollywood has always been surrounded by legends and theories about its inner workings, but the letter suggested something beyond mere power games. It spoke of a closed circle, an invisible group operating in the shadows, dictating the fate of the industry. The stars shine on screen, but in the shadows, other forces direct the spectacle, read one of its passages. Over the decades, rumors have surfaced about secret societies within the film industry. Some dismissed them as fiction, but others pointed to intriguing patterns. The document did not mention names directly, but insinuated that directors, producers, and elite actors participated in rituals and pacts sealed away from the public eye. These were not just business contracts, they were commitments from which there was no escape. Contrary to what many imagine, the industry has always exercised control over its talents. During Hollywood's golden age, studios not only decided which films their actors would star in, but also who they would marry and how they should behave. The letter suggested that this control had not disappeared, it had simply become more sophisticated. Evidence of this dominance could be seen in recurring patterns. Some stars rose to fame meteorically, only to vanish without convincing explanations. Others disappeared after showing a desire to break away from the system. What differentiated those who remained untouchable from those who were discarded? One of the document's most intriguing passages spoke about symbols and hidden messages within the industry itself. Award ceremonies, events, and even films would contain invisible signatures, markers indicating that certain artists and directors had been initiated into this exclusive circle. These references were in plain sight, yet few had the trained eye to notice them. The idea of pacts was not new. Since the dawn of cinema, there have been reports of actors being invited to private meetings where they were offered shortcuts to success, opportunities that came at a steep price. The letter described these moments as points of no return, where the decision to enter or refuse determined the fate of a career. Those who attempted to break away from the group faced severe consequences. The document contained a chilling excerpt. The stage does not forget those who try to exit through the back door. Could this explain the sudden disappearance of certain celebrities, or the public breakdown some suffered after trying to expose what went on behind the scenes? In the 2000s, actors like Corey Feldman began speaking openly about secret exploitation networks within the industry. He and his friend Corey Haim experienced abrupt rises and falls, with Haim tragically passing away and Feldman claiming that both knew too much. Strangely enough, the letter, written decades earlier, had already mentioned that the industry's protected ones will be the first to speak, but their voices will be drowned out by the noise of the spectacle. If the document was correct, this cycle of rise and fall was not random. It was part of a carefully orchestrated mechanism. But the bigger question remained: who was really behind this system? And more importantly, was there a way to escape its rules? The letter, despite its enigmatic tone, was not based solely on vague predictions. In several passages, it seemed to intertwine the industry's secrets with events that, decades later, would come to light. But how could someone have prior knowledge of scandals that had yet to unfold? Was it a disguised denunciation or a script pre-written for a story that had already been decided? One of the most disturbing excerpts read, "The powerful will fall one by one, not out of remorse, but because the audience will begin to see beyond the spectacle." Could this be a reference to what happened years later with the hashtag #MeToo movement? Before 2017, cases of abuse in the industry were treated as silent rumors, whispered behind the scenes but never taken seriously. However, when the first accusations emerged against major figures in film production, the domino effect was immediate. Could this letter have foreseen the beginning of impunity's downfall? The name Harvey Weinstein became synonymous with the collapse of an empire. For years, he was one of the most influential men in the industry, but just a few revelations were enough to bring his image crashing down. Strangely, the letter mentioned that those who direct the spectacle do not live to see the final act. Did this imply that the system would always sacrifice some figures to preserve the rest of the structure? Another intriguing point was its references to methods of psychological control. The letter spoke of minds that no longer belonged to themselves, suggesting that certain figures in the industry were shaped and manipulated to play roles both on and off the screen. This brings to mind the MKUltra project, a real-life experiment conducted by the CIA between the 1950s and 1970s, in which mind control techniques were tested on individuals without their consent. Some theorists suggest that Hollywood not only knew of these practices but applied them more subtly, through abusive contracts, media control, and even induced substance use. Stars like Britney Spears and Amanda Bynes suffered public breakdowns that raised suspicions. Both went through intensely publicized crises, followed by long periods of strict control by third parties. Spears, for example, lived under a court-ordered conservatorship for more than a decade, without control over her own finances or personal decisions. The letter mentioned something that aligned with this narrative. When an artist tries to escape, the curtain closes upon them. Another event that seemed to mirror the document's words was the NXIVM scandal, a group that operated under the guise of a self-help program but, behind the scenes, functioned as a cult involving elite figures. Actresses and producers were linked to the scheme, and the story revealed that Hollywood, far from being just an entertainment industry, was fertile ground for manipulation and control. The letter also referenced what it called the circle of broken promises, mentioning that certain individuals would reach the top only to be destroyed once they were no longer useful. Cases of artists who experienced meteoric rises and abrupt falls are common in cinema history. Judy Garland, one of the biggest stars of the 20th century, had her life marked by studio abuse that controlled every aspect of her career. River Phoenix, a promising young actor, died tragically at 23, leaving many questions about what really happens behind the scenes of fame. The death of Marilyn Monroe remains one of Hollywood's most mysterious cases. Officially ruled an overdose, her passing was surrounded by theories involving everything from relationships with political figures to supposed secrets she had uncovered. The letter mentioned that the muses of cinema will always know too much, and that is why they never grow old before the cameras. Could this be a reference to Monroe's tragic fate and that of so many other stars who left too soon? Another passage in the letter seemed to allude to the so-called 27 Club, a group of artists who died at age 27 under suspicious circumstances. Names like Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Kurt Cobain, and more recently, Amy Winehouse are part of this list. The document spoke of lives cut short at their peak, so that the myth never fades away. Was this mere coincidence, or was there something more behind these historical patterns? What made this letter so unsettling was not just its content, but its accuracy in describing the mechanics of power within the industry. Over the years, many of the dynamics mentioned in the document became visible to the public. The big question is, if it has been right so far, what else is yet to happen? The letter did not just warn about Hollywood's power structure, it also revealed the fate of those who dared to challenge the system. The curtains do not close the same way for everyone. Some leave to applause, others disappear without a trace. Read one of its most enigmatic passages. The document suggested that within the industry, there was a silencing mechanism, a ruthless method to ensure that certain secrets never reached the public. Hollywood's history is filled with careers that were abruptly destroyed. In some cases, the decline seemed natural, a result of the ups and downs of fame. But in others, the pattern was alarming. Rising artists who suddenly faced inexplicable scandals, public breakdowns, or disappeared completely from the radar. In the late 1950s, a young screenwriter named David Chaplin was emerging as one of Hollywood's most promising writers. In interviews, he hinted that the industry operated under an unofficial code, where certain privileges came with hidden obligations. Shortly after, he was found dead under suspicious circumstances. His last screenplay, which told the story of a secret organization within the film industry, was never produced and vanished from the studio's archives. Decades later, similar cases continued to occur. Corey Haim, one of the most promising teen stars of the 1980s, saw his career suddenly collapse. His friend Corey Feldman, who still fights to expose the industry's dark secrets, claimed that Haim was a victim of a system from which there was no escape. The letter, written long before these events, seemed to predict something similar. Actors are puppets, and when the strings are cut, few remain standing. Another case that raised suspicions was that of Brittany Murphy. Vibrant and talented, her career was cut short by a sudden and mysterious death. Just a few months later, her husband, Simon Monjack, died under similar circumstances. Before passing, Brittany gave interviews where she suggested she was being followed. What did she know? And why had her career lost momentum so quickly before her death? The letter contained an unsettling passage about those who tried to escape the industry's control. When an artist tries to flee, the curtain falls upon them. Could this explain the series of public breakdowns experienced by figures like Britney Spears and Amanda Bynes? Both went through intensely public crises, followed by strict conservatorship where others took control of their lives and finances. Were these interventions truly for their protection, or was something else happening behind the scenes? Another name that resonates in this narrative is Brandon Lee, son of Bruce Lee, who died tragically on the set of The Crow, 1994. The gun used in the scene was not supposed to contain live ammunition, yet somehow it was loaded. The case was ruled an accident, but many questions were left unanswered. The letter mentioned heirs of legends who try to rewrite the past and pay the price for it. Could this have any connection to what happened to Brandon? Beyond mysterious deaths, the letter also referenced lost files, documents, contracts, and evidence that could expose the industry's hidden structure. Some theories suggest that these records were destroyed over the years, but the document hinted that some still existed, hidden in secure locations. Who possessed them, and when would they be revealed? Silencing mechanisms were not limited to individuals. Even certain productions seemed to be censored or altered to conceal uncomfortable truths. Eyes Wide Shut, 1999, by Stanley Kubrick, is one of the most well-known examples. The film allegedly contained scenes that, according to rumors, were forcibly removed before its release. Kubrick died shortly after finishing the film, sparking speculation about what was really cut from the final version. The letter mentioned that some directors see too much and try to open the public's eyes, but the all-seeing eyes are always watching. If so many people have tried to expose the industry's secrets over the years, why has no one succeeded in bringing everything to light? The document suggested that there was a continuous effort to keep the truth hidden, and those who got too close simply disappeared or lost their credibility. But how long could this system maintain control? The letter seemed to indicate that the worst was yet to come. When the next generation of stars realizes where they have stepped, it will already be too late to escape, read one of its final passages. The big question remained: was there anyone willing to challenge this structure and reveal what really happens behind Hollywood's closed doors? The letter ended with an intriguing phrase: "The show must go on, but not all the actors remain the same." This statement suggested that even in the face of scandals, revelations, and the downfall of major figures, the structure behind the industry would not be completely destroyed. On the contrary, it would simply adapt, swapping faces and narratives to keep the audience entertained. But did this mean Hollywood was truly collapsing, or was it just undergoing another carefully orchestrated transformation? Since its foundation, the film industry has gone through various crises and renaissances. In the 1920s, the scandal surrounding Fatty Arbuckle nearly destroyed the reputation of American cinema. In the 1950s, the political persecution of supposed communists in Hollywood led to the exile of screenwriters and directors. In the 2000s, the rise of the internet and streaming platforms threatened the monopoly of major studios. Yet, in all these instances, Hollywood not only survived but emerged even stronger. What made this crisis different? The letter suggested that the problem now was not just external but internal. The public itself was beginning to question the industry's authenticity. Award shows lost credibility, box office numbers declined, and scandals revealed that the backstage reality was far from the glamorous image long sold to audiences. What would happen when people stopped believing in the illusion? Curiously, over the years, Hollywood's approach to handling crises seemed to follow a pattern. When part of the system was exposed, certain figures were sacrificed so that the rest could remain intact. The #MeToo movement, for instance, brought down some powerful names, but many others remained untouched. Did this mean the purge was genuine, or was it just a way to contain the damage? The letter stated, "When an empire begins to crumble, new gods arise to command the spectacle." Could this mean that Hollywood was already preparing for its next phase, with new stars and a new approach to remain relevant? The growth of streaming platforms, for example, has completely changed the entertainment dynamic, taking absolute control out of the hands of major studios. But did this truly represent a shift in power, or was it just a new format for the same system to operate? Another intriguing theory is that Hollywood was deliberately going through this crisis to reinvent itself. Major empires have always used chaos as a means of restructuring, and the entertainment industry would be no different. In the 1960s, when audiences began rejecting traditional Golden Age films, the new Hollywood movement emerged, bringing in directors like Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola to give cinema a fresh feel. Now, something similar could be happening, a calculated deconstruction to prepare for the next phase of the industry's dominance. The most unsettling question, however, was, if Hollywood was not truly collapsing but instead mutating, what kind of new structure was being prepared? The letter ended with a chilling warning. The audience believes they are in control, but they never were. And when the next curtain rises, it will be too late to realize who really wrote the script. Did this mean that the industry's downfall was just an illusion? Was Hollywood truly dying, or was it merely preparing for something even greater? Hollywood has always been a reflection of what the audience wants to see, but also of what certain groups want to be seen. The letter, discovered decades after it was written, seemed to have predicted not just the collapse of reputations and cinematic empires, but also how the industry would adapt to continue existing. Throughout history, secrets have been buried, careers erased, and truths masked to preserve the illusion that sustains the spectacle. But how much longer can this continue? This story is just one piece, and one day, you might see the whole puzzle. If this made you think, subscribe, like the video. It helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share. After all, more voices mean more discoveries.